Hey, what's up? Today I'm going to teach you how I mix pop vocals. Take your vocals from this.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
To sounding like this.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Let's get in it. All right, so first things first, let's just listen to our main vocal soloed with nothing on it.
Bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Awesome performance, comped, edited, all that fun stuff, ready to mix. First things first, we've got auto-tune. This is mainly on there for the vibe it brings. 23 retune speed, 64 humanize. This isn't really doing too much tuning. It's just tightening things up and making it sound a little bit more polished. Next up, we got Pro Q3. If you don't have Pro Q3 already, go out, buy it right now. It slaps. We've got a low cut at 90 Hertz, then a little notch here at 2.7K, just taking out some harshness. With this U87 clone that we've recorded the vocals with, I always notice there's a little bit of harshness around here, so this cleans that up. It's also got a little bit of dynamic EQ, which is another reason Pro Q3 rules. Next, we got a little high shelf, just working on the high-end sibilants. Then there is this low shelf. This is mainly to rebalance the vocal so it sounds a little bit brighter and just fits in the mix a little bit better. All right, let's hear the vocal with the Pro Q3 on and off. So this is it with it off.
Bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
And this is with Pro Q3 on.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Cool. Not doing an insane amount of stuff, just making the vocal sound a little bit better. Next up, we have VMR by Slate Digital. First thing in this rack is an 1176 Blue Stripe clone. 4:1 ratio, medium attack, fast release, pretty classic settings. We're doing around 16 dBs of compression here. Let's have a listen to that.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Cool, sounds pretty rad. Makes the vocal sound a little bit better, a little bit more compressed, obviously. Next up, we have an LA2A.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Again, doing a decent amount of compression, also adding a bunch of level this time. Next, we have the FGA. This is an APR clone. A little bit of boost in the high end at 15K, then a little bit of a cut around 400 Hertz.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Sounds pretty rad. Again, just working our way to a final vocal sound. Next up, Pro DS. De-esser. If you don't have it, get one. This rules.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Next, Pro Q3.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really
Removing a little bit of 1.6K. Just a little bit sort of telephony frequency. Again, notching out this 2.7K.
they think that I'm a bad
Just kind of a gross whistly frequency that doesn't really add much coolness to it. This is a dynamic EQ at 4.3K. Then we've got a boost at 6.6K.
They think
This would have just helped it cut through the mix a little bit more. All right, so that's our first layer of processing on this main vocal. Let's go to our next one. Another API clone. This is just the Waves one. 2 dB boost at 12.5K, then a 2 dB cut at 200.
they think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just
Just adding a little bit more nice top, also cutting some of those ghost lows that we don't actually need in a vocal. Next up, Pro MB.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
After adding all that high end, it's good to be able to contain it again at the end. This is pretty much just acting like a de-esser, just really clamping down on that high end, trying to smooth things out. Satin 2 by Fab Filter, just adding a little bit of brightness up here.
Bad bitch, but really I'm just
A little bit of brightness, tiny little bit of saturation, just again, moving towards having a final cool sounding vocal. All right, next up, we've got an L1 that's actually doing something this time.
They think that I'm a bad bitch.
Just making the vocal sound consistent, compressing it and limiting it more. Pro Q3, again.
They think that I'm a bad bitch.
Absolutely tiny cut here at 270 Hertz. Don't know why it's there. Next, we've got a cut at 3K.
They think that I'm a
Again, just removing that gross sort of area in vocals that's kind of whistly and doesn't sound that great. Next, we got a dynamic band here at 3.9K. Then we got a boosted 8K, 8K rules. Then a boost again at 11K. Next, another layer of de-essing.
They think that I'm a bad bitch.
Self-explanatory on that one. Another layer of de-essing, just at a different frequency.
They think that I'm a bad bitch.
The reason I do these different layers of de-essing is just so there isn't too much done at the same time. And usually in a vocal, there will be different areas of the vocal that will pop out. And I don't want to kind of just go through and just de-ess the whole top end, which I kind of done already with the Pro MB. I want to sort of capture those specific spots and turn them down without having to go through and automate everything, which I have done in this mix anyway. Sweet. Next up, another Pro Q3. If you look here, you'll see that on the mix knob in Reaper, it is at 0% right now. That's because this EQ is just automated. It's for very specific words that I noticed had gross frequencies and that just didn't sound too great. So for instance, here it is.
To get out of bed.
Just on that bed, I noticed that there was something weird going on at the front end of the word.
To get out of bed.
The little kind of click. I'll play it again for you.
To get out of bed.
You can hear it there. I didn't want to go in, choose another word because I really liked the performance on this word, but we needed to figure out how to get rid of that little click. So, decided to just automate this EQ on and off.
To get out of bed, sick of...
Sweet. In the mix, you don't really notice it being turned on and off. It's just very, very subtle, but it helps heaps. So if you're mixing a vocal and it's got a weird pop, click, or anything like that, maybe look at automating your EQ. That way you can also be very harsh with the amount of cuts you do with EQ, but you can use it in a subtle way. So it'll save some things without ruining the whole vocal mix. Next, we're gonna have a look at our vocal effects ends. This is where we do all our reverbs, our delays, and our chorus/doubling effects. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna solo this effects group for you so you can hear what it sounds like.
Sick of feeling trapped and always stuck in my head. Crying all night, but they'll never know.
Alright, let's start from the bottom. First, we got Waves Doubler.
Sick of feeling trapped.
Classic doubler, classic double sound. Just steal this preset, it works on every vocal, and it works to make shit sound doubly. Next up, we've got a little effecty reverb here that is automated up in the verses. Just adds a little bit of space in the second half of the verses, which is awesome. Next, we got a whole reverb. This is Waves R-verb, just on the whole setting. Cool, sounds reverby. Then we got an EQ, just taking out a bunch of grossness. Just removing a bunch of muddy mid-range that we don't really need. Next up, we've got a plate verb. Using the Waves Abbey Road plates. Don't really use this plugin that often, but decided to reach for it for this time. First things first, in that chain, we actually have a de-esser. So that's with it on, and this is with it off. If you'll notice, the vocal is way brighter with it off. I didn't really want this. I didn't really want all those gross S's going to the reverb and making stuff sound messy. Just de-ess the vocal first, just to tidy it up a little bit. Next up, we got a delay. Super subtle, just adding a little bit of movement to the vocal. Next up, we've got a delay. This delay is automated, so it only happens on certain words, and it's only really happening in the bridge. Let's have a listen to that. Cool. Just adding a bunch of delay to that last word, just so it throws out and sounds really nice and bloomy. Here it is in the mix.
Like this all the time. Please don't.
Sounds rad. Adds a heap of vibe to the line, kind of fills that gap too. Delay throws rule. For that chain, we've got H delay by Waves, awesome delay. Then we've got Valhalla Vintage Verb, just making it sound a little bit roomy, a little bit further away. Then we've got Wider by Infected Mushroom, which slaps, just widening the hell out of it, just so it has a different place in the mix than the main vocal. Sweet. Another throw. This is a reverb throw. This is just to add a little bit of space on certain lines and in certain spots.
Compliment my style. Feel completely naked. Slip back into character.
just so that second half of the verse has a little bit more character, has its own space, and kind of does its own thing in the mix without it just blending into the rest of everything else. If you listen to the composition of the song, there's not much changing between the first half and the second half of the verse in the instrumental. So my main focus then as a mix engineer is to figure out how the second half of the verse has its own special moment with the effects given and with the vocals given. All right, let's look at that chain. First up, Pro Q3, removing some upper mids. Then Pro DS, just de-essing the vocal, just to sort of make sure there's no sibilance that pops out in the reverb. Sibilance and reverb doesn't sound that great. Next we got Micro Shift, just adding a little bit of chorus to it. Then we've got Verb Suite Classics. I'm pretty sure this is the default setting. Then with the decay all the way up and the wet around 60%. Let's have a listen to that send by itself. Let's hear it with and without the EQ and the de-essing. If you hear on the style, the S pops out in a really bad way. This would just cut straight through the mix and kind of draw your attention to that reverb and pull you out of the moment. For the average listener, those type of things would just make the song sound bad. We don't want things to sound bad, we want things to sound good. That's why we've got to do these little EQ tricks before reverb, just to make things a little bit tidier. This one will help clean up your reverbs heaps and make your reverbs sound more like reverbs and kind of support your vocal rather than pop out over the top of things, which I don't really think is the main aim for spacey reverbs like that. And that's it for that group of vocal effects. Now we're onto our next vocal effects. So first up, we've got this little reverb for the bridge. I'll play you the bridge without this reverb first.
Please don't ask me.
Sounds great. Could sound better with the reverb.
Please don't ask me how I'm doing.
Just adds a lot of space to the bridge and also gives it a bit more vibe. In that chain, first we've got a de-esser, then we've got Valhalla Room at 100% wet, SSL compression, just compressing the reverb so it's a little bit more consistent, another de-esser, stock Reaper EQ, just cutting the low end. That reverb solid sounds like this. You can already hear there just soloing it. You can hear kind of the chance for it to sound harsh and whistly. So let's take off the DS's and see how bad it sounds without those on. Just cuts through the wicks way too much. There's way too much high end there. It doesn't really fit the vibe of the bridge. Next, we've got a delay throw that happens at the end of the song.
I'm just sad, bitch.
Just to fill out the outro there. Both of these delay throws are just done with Soundtoys Echo Boy. A little bit of EQ on there to cut some low end, cut some high end. But apart from that, nothing too special. Next up, we've got a tape throw that just builds a transition into our last chorus. Now, I'm gonna play the bridge to the chorus and you can hear the transition by itself.
I'll be fine. Think that I'm a bad.
Sounds cool, maybe a little bit empty, maybe not intense enough transitioning into that drop off. So the way I've added some energy and added a little bit of intensity to that section is by doing a tape delay throw. For this one, we've got the T-Rex Tape Echo, then Valhalla Vintage Verb at 40% wet. It sounds like this.
I'll be fine. Think that I'm a bad.
Just to really make that transition a little bit more stark. Then we've got another effect just to make this transition a little bit more impactful. It's just a vocal reverse. Next up, we've got this channel called More Layers. This is exactly the way it's titled. This is just more layers for the chorus for some specific words. This is the chorus without it.
Think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage. Got so many bad.
Sounds cool, but it could sound cooler. With the more layers, this is what that sounds like.
Think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage.
Just makes the chorus sound a little bit fuller, a little bit more like a group of people are singing along. The effects for this one are repitch with a bit of a wet and dry mix here. We've got the wet down at -3.8. Then we've got it shifted up an octave and then the formant shifted down 6 semitones. The reason I shift this formant down is just leaving it at 0 just usually sounds a little bit too shrill and makes it pop out a little bit too much. We want this effect to sound like a group of people singing along. We don't want it to sound like chipmunks singing along. Next up, Waves Doubler. Then we've just got FabFilter Pro Q3 with a little bit of a cut at 300, just in the center channel, just to create a little bit of space for the main vocal and not to make the mix sound too muddy. That effect sounds like this soloed.
Sad bitch. Habits.
So a little bit of a subtle octave effect on that one. Next, we've got a little vocal glitch that happens in the chorus. It's just the first word of the next line repeated. This has a little bit of panning and a little bit of volume automation. It also has a high cut by the stock Reaper EQ. The reason I've added this high cut is so that when the next line comes in, the next line has impact. If I left this high cut off, you'll notice that the next line loses a bit of impact in the top end. Still sounds cool, but it doesn't really sit in the mix right and definitely makes the next line lose that impact. That's it for all our vocal effects sends in this mix. All right, now we're onto our vocal layers, and there is a lot of them. You'll see here we've got our main Vox Layers channel, but then above that, we've got 2 additional tracks. First up, we've got a vocal ad-lib channel. This happens in the chorus and for one line before the first chorus. That sounds like this. And this fun line here.
Oh my God.
The chain for that one, Pro Q2. This is a little bit of an older template, so I'm using Pro Q2 for a lot of these vocals here. LA2A. L1 just doing some limiting. An EQ just adding some high end and cutting out some mid-range. A de-esser, auto-tune on auto mode, a little bit of widening. Stock Reaper EQ, just cutting some low end. Decapitator, this is just adding a bunch of saturation and character. Here's what it sounds like without Decapitator on. Sounds good, but it could have a little bit more character, be a little bit more unique. Sounds way cooler. Waves Reverb, just at 22% wet. JST side widener, just to push this ad-lib out to the sides. Then another stock Reaper EQ, just cutting some low end and any low end that this reverb has introduced into the sound. Awesome. Next up, we've got a very commonly used pop vocal effect, which is a low octave double. This is created with the stock Reaper pitch plugin, shifted down an octave, and then the formant shifts it up 5 semitones. This is just the main vocal, shifted down an octave, and this just adds a little bit of support for it. Again, we've got Pro Q2, LA2A, limiting, EQ, doing the same EQ moves as the last channel, de-esser, widener, just a little bit more narrow this time, and then another limiter just to peg this in place. Don't really want this vocal moving dynamically at all or getting quieter or louder throughout the whole line. I just want it to sit at the one level the whole time. Awesome, now we're on to our main layers group. I'll just solo this group first so we can hear what it's doing.
I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just sad bitch.
A lot of harmonies, a lot of layers going on. Really cool stacked vocal sound. Love this type of vocal production for these kind of songs. All right, so first up, we've got our main vocal dubs. These are a center vocal and a left and a right vocal. The center vocal is happening throughout the whole song, just as support for the main vocal. Then the left and the right are popping in through the second half of the verse and through the choruses. These have all been tuned and edited and vocalized to the main vocal, just so they're super tight. You'll notice in the chorus that I've cut off the end of the word in these vocals at some points. This is so the main vocal cuts through more on these lines. Let's look at the FX chain for this. So for our center, Pro Q2 with a low cut and then a bunch of notching. Then we've got CLA 76 with the Rock My Vocal preset, doing a bunch of compression. Stock Reaper EQ, cutting some low end, cutting some mids around 800. Pro Q2, again cutting more low end around 220. Then a few little cuts here in the mid range. L1, just adding a bunch of limiting. CLA vocals, this is just a tweaked version of the Rock Female preset. Cutting some low end, boosting some highs, adding some compression, a little bit of reverb, and a little bit of delay. Then this vocal is de-essed. For the left and the right, we've got the start of that chain, so Pro Q2 into the CLA 76. On both of them together, we've got Pro Q3, cutting some low end at 200, and some low end and low mids at 440. Then a little bit of a wide cut here that's just pretty much de-essing the top end, making some space for our main vocals. Satin 2, just adding some saturation on the high end. Then wider, just widening out our vocals and pushing that to the sides. That's it for our main doubles. Next up, a low octave double.
I'm a bad bitch.
This is tightly edited to the main vocal using vocal line, just as a super tight double in the low end. Pro Q2, LA2A, L1, EQ, Q10 by Waves, de-esser, L1, then auto-tune. If you'll notice between this channel and the last few previous channels we looked at, a lot of the settings have been the same or very similar. This is because for doubles and layers, when looking at it from a workflow perspective, it's a little bit quicker and more effective to just copy settings between channels, then tweak them, rather than go through and create a unique chain for every single channel. Realistically, in a song like this, a lot of these doubles are just there to support the main vocal. There'll be some things that have a lot of character to add some more energy to a section. These layers, however, are there to support the main vocal. Therefore, we don't really need to dive too deep on our processing or go too crazy with our effects chain. Next, we've got another double. This one just has auto-tune, VMR with a little bit of a mic emulation here, a preamp emulation, 1176 blue stripe, distressor clone, LA2A, and this API EQ at the end. You notice with this one I'm doing a decent amount of compression across everything. This is just to pin this vocal in place. Then we've got a de-esser, Pro Q3 with similar settings as before, and then Waves doubler just pushing it out to the sides. Next up, we've got a fake high octave double. This one's just in the bridge. This is pretty much just to add a kind of octave reverb to the bridge. First, we've got Reaper's stock EQ cutting some low end and some mids, then repitch, up an octave with the formant down 13 semitones. CLA 76, rock my vocal preset again. Reaper stock EQ with a big cut here at 2.5K and cutting off some low end again. Waves doubler, but this time it's with the 4 voices. L1, just to pin it in place. Pro Q2, cutting off a bunch of high end. Reverb here at 100% wet. Next up, we've got a channel that has a couple of ad-libs and a couple of high harmonies. The ad-libs in this channel are the ones in the verse and some harmonies in the chorus / bridge. The ad-libs sound like this. Super wide sounding, pretty unique sounding, and just sit in a cool place in the mix. First on this chain, we've got auto-tune, just in auto. Then we've got Slate VMR, boosting some 5.4K, cutting some low end at 80. Then an 1176 clone again, medium tack, fast release, 4:1 ratio, then LA2A. Doing a lot of compression on these just to pin them in place. Pro DS, Pro Q3, a lot of cuts here in the lower mids, a little bit of a scoop around 1000, a big boost at 5.8K. This would have been just to make this vocal cut through the mix. Then we're on to JSD side widener, really pushing it out to the sides. That's followed by L1 pinning it in place again. As you can see, I didn't want this vocal going anywhere. Next, we're on to some belted layers for the chorus, just to add a little bit more energy. These are just to add a bunch of character to the chorus and make it feel a little bit more energetic. One of the luxuries of working with such a good vocalist is that they're able to do kind of any technique or any type of layer you'd like without too much effort. So doing these extra type of layers really can add a lot of impact to your chorus and a lot of character to your chorus. The processing for these, a Slate VMR first with the 1176 blue stripe, attacks at 5, releases as fast as possible, 4:1 ratio into the distressor, then into LA2A, into the API EQ. Again, doing a lot of compression on these just to make them sound really aggressive. Followed by an L1, just creating a ceiling for these guys. De-esser, Pro Q3 with a boost at 7.8K. Then an automated Valhalla vintage verb for the bridge. Next, we've got the opposite of our last layers with some breathy layers. These both have auto-tune on them first. VMR, we got this FGN here boosting a little of the high end, boosting around 5K, then cutting a little bit of the low end. Then we have this 1176, just doing some compression. Similar settings as before, medium attack, fast release. LA2A again doing some compression. Pro DS, Pro Q3, cutting some low end, then boosting around this 3.2K area. This is just to have these cut in a different way than the main vocal. On to our next set, which is our main harmonies. Chain for these ones. ReQ, cutting the low end, cutting a little bit of mids. CLA 76, rock my vocal preset again, always awesome. CLA 2A, doing around 10-20 dB of compression. Then Pro Q3 with this same preset, shout out Ryan Harvey. These are then sent to a channel with Valhalla Vintage Verb, L1, de-esser, and Pro Q3 again, cutting low end and low mids. The Valhalla Verb on these is automated just to hit in a specific line in the second verse. In the mix, that sounds like this. Pull myself together, but it's only for show. A little bit of a subtle tail there added on that one. Not super in your face, but just adds to the vibe of the song. Next up is our male harmonies. Bad bitch. They support the main vocals great. Just add a different tone, add a different texture. Processing for those, Reaper's stock EQ first, LA2A, Pro Q3 with that same preset. Then they're sent to L1, de-esser, de-esser again, Pro Q3 again, cutting a bit of low end, boosting some highs, and notching out some 3.9K with a dynamic EQ. That's it for all the layers in this song. They're then sent to a layered group that has a little bit of processing. We've got L1, just to tame anything. If it wants to go louder than I want it to. Just to tame any stray peaks or anything like that. Then Pro Q3, taking out a bunch of low end, scooping something around 100, cutting the middle channel around 360 Hertz. That middle channel cut sounds like this. I clean up the center for the main vocal. Then we've got another little cut around 2.4K. This is triggered by our main vocal via sidechain compression. Again, just trying to clean up some space for the main vocal. Then we've got another middle channel cut at 2.9K, carving out space for our main vocal. Then a little cut at 3.6K. Then a little bit more sidechain dynamic EQ / compression. This is coming from the main channel, just ducking around 8.8K in the layers. So the main vocal has a little bit more space on the high end. That's it for our Vox layers processing. We do have one more little delay throw that adds a little bit of movement to the chorus. That's this one right here, just happening on specific lines in the chorus just to make them pop out a little bit more. If I mute it, you'll hear in the chorus, it just bounces a little less. Sounds rad, sounds really good, just doesn't bounce as hard. So with that delay throw in, it sounds like this.
They think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just savage. Get so many.
Adds a little bit more bounce to the chorus, makes it sound a little bit funner. Last up, let's just look at our finalizers on our vocal channels. I'm a sucker for putting L1 on everything, and L1 is my go-to limiter at the end of my vocal channels and vocal channels. That is just doing a little bit of limiting just to make sure that the level stays consistent and where I want it. There's one final little move I did in this song on the main vocals just to make it a little bit more dynamic and make certain sections pop a little bit more. This is for the bridge. The main thing with the bridge is that it's pretty soft and pretty delicate. So I wanted to kind of replicate this in my vocal chain and in my vocal processing. If I left it the same as the rest of the song, it would probably just sound too bright and a little bit out of place. What I've done is I've automated a band on Pro Q3 just to bring down the top end a little bit. It goes from plus 1.6 dB down to negative 14 dB at 11K. We can listen to that within the context of the song.
Really, I'm just sad, bitch. I'm sorry. Please don't worry.
Let's listen to that with the vocal the same way it is in the chorus and see how overly bright it is.
I'm sorry.
Vocal ends up just sounding harsh and out of place, not a vibe. So what I've done, automate it down, make it sound softer there, and then halfway through, I brought it up to negative 3 dB, so the vocal's getting progressively brighter now. Then, in the drop, just before everything drops back in, I've got it at negative 0.3 dB, just so it's a tiny bit less bright, so when it all smacks back in, it really has some power.
Think that I'm a bad bitch, but really I'm just sad, bitch. Get so many bad habits.
And that's how I mix pop vocals for this song. It can change from production to production, but in a general sense, this is what I do. Some songs will require more, some songs will require less, some songs will need way more automation, and some will require none at all. Shout out Lunacy for letting me use their rad track, Sad Bitch. It's out right now on all streaming services. Stream it now, the link's in the description. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you liked it in the comments or if you'd like to see anything else.